In the 15th century, the resolution of the Papal Schism and the return of papacy from Avignon to Rome led to the re-establishment of Rome as the heart of the Catholic Church. Through the late 15th and the 16th century, Rome enjoyed a period of intense cultural and artistic development, essentially replacing Florence as the epicenter of Italian Renaissance. One may notice, however, as we look at the evolution of art through this period, that it increasingly distanced itself from the humanist ideals established by the forerunners of Renaissance, like Alberti. Art in the service of a clergy determined to project its wealth, power, and splendor gradually evolved towards more bizarre forms in the Mannerist and Baroque movements. The architect Donato Bramante, born in 1444, is one of the forerunners of High Renaissance in Rome. In the beginning of the 16th century, he built the Tempietto in the courtyard of the monastery of San Pietro in Montorio, possibly commissioned by Pope Julius II. Marking the place where St. Peter was crucified, this small temple adopts the circular shape which had already been appreciated in the early years of the Renaissance as a symbol of cosmic harmony and order. It seems to draw inspiration from ancient Roman folly, like the Temple of Vesta in Tivoli, and its complex ornamentation and tectonic composition, especially the ground-level Toscan colonnade and the entablature decorated with triglyphs, are traits that mark a point of return to antique architecture. Bramante also planned to harmonize the church's courtyard with this new building by rebuilding its whole perimeter in a circular shape, but this plan was unfortunately not implemented. Bramante's other famous works include the cloister of the Church of Santa Maria della Pace, the first phase of the Cortile de Belvedere in the Apostolic Palace in Vatican, and the now demolished Palazzo Caprini, where the famous artist Raffaello lived for a few years until his death. The Church of Santa Maria della Consolazione in the town of Todi, remarkable for its Greek cross shape with four apses surrounding a central domed portion, is also commonly attributed to Bramante, although with a degree of uncertainty. In the last few years of his life, he worked the early designs of the new St. Peter's Basilica, which I would like to talk about more in a later video. In the works of the artist Raffaello, we see an increasing interest towards classical monumentality, paralleling the evolution of the work of Bramante. On the painting The Marriage of the Virgin, a theme we saw again previously in my video about the Quattrocento, it is important to note the architectural evolution of the temple in the background. This building, possibly an anachronistic representation of the Temple of Jerusalem, is a rotunda strikingly similar to Bramante's Tempietto, full with a ground floor loggia and a domed upper portion. Although the Tempietto was built 2 years prior, it is questionable whether this suggests a conscious inspiration, as Raffaello only came to Rome and came in contact with Bramante in 1508. Raffaello's School of Athens, finished in 1511 in the Stanza della Segnatura of the Apostolic Palace, depicts a congregation of philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists from ancient Greece, including Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, Archimedes, Heraclitus, etc. The setting is a massive classicist space with strong perspective covered by a coffered barrel vault, which at several points is perforated to reveal the exterior sky. So the natural elements of the outside, like sky, clouds, and sunlight, invade the interior space as if the building was a kind of ruin or a forum rather than a building. The overall articulation of this space bears similarities to Raffaello's design for the St. Peter's Basilica, which he was working on at the time. Among Raffaello's built works is the Palazzo Branconio dell'Aquila, which could be demolished in 1660 to make way for St. Peter's Square, so it doesn't exist anymore. Based on the available drawings, this palazzo shows an evolution in its ornamental intricacy compared to older palazzi. The ground floor is marked by arches, which are framed by heavy Doric pilasters. The windows of the piano nobile are framed by small columns supporting pediments that alternate between triangular and arched shapes. These complexities on the facade surrounding the openings originate from some works of ancient Roman architecture, where in similar manners elements like the pediment or the columns, which in ancient Greece were purely structural elements, were gradually diversified and refined into ornaments. The emblems above the windows of the piano nobile, of which the central one protrudes towards the above level, also reflect the evolution towards Mannerist playfulness and disruption of ideals of harmony and wholeness. Raffaello also worked along with Antonio da Sangalo the Younger on the Villa Madama, with decorations being done by Giulio Romano and Baldassare Peruzzi. One half of this villa was completed, so what was planned to be a circular central courtyard actually became a kind of semicircular south facade. It is interesting though to note the playful decorations of this semicircle, mainly the alternation between large cylindrical columns and small Ionic columns framing the windows, all composed of colored stripes of brick against an otherwise flat background. This completely contradicts the role model of the Florentine palazzi, where the pilasters would appear flat against a rusticated backdrop. Baldassare Peruzzi gained attention primarily through the Palazzo Massimo alle Colonne, which is unusual for its carved facade corresponding to the need to fill the entirety of the available plot. This curvature is a trace, like a palimpsest, of the ancient Odeon of Emperor Domitian, which used to stand on the side. In order to better accommodate a person entering from this narrow street, a transitional space is made in the form of a loggia occupying a central portion of the ground floor. The whole facade is composed of rusticated stonework without any classical orders on the upper floors. Villa Farnesina, also a work of Peruzzi in collaboration with Raffaello and other artists, also presents a large loggia on the ground floor. The most remarkable aspect of this villa, though, are the interior painting decorations, which show examples of trompe-l'œil, a kind of illusion where the painting, through techniques of perspective, creates a false perception of depth. Antonio da Sangalo the Younger designed the church of Santa Maria di Loreto, one of the earliest examples of a dome on square plan church in the Renaissance era. Here we see a departure from Bramante's purely classical ideals towards an eclectic kind of classical architecture with complex decorations jumping out of each other and escalating upwards on the building's form. The central doorway of the facade breaks the base upon which stand paired Ionic pilasters. These support a pediment that is choked in the middle by a window ledge. The dome, punctured with circular windows, culminates to an ornate cupola, with columns cantilevering over the void, supported by sculpted scrolls. During those years, Michelangelo became very famous in the arts discourse, primarily through sculptures like Pietà, the Statue of David, and his painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. The last one is particularly interesting not only for the vividness of the mythological sceneries, but also for the way Michelangelo orchestrated and organized this massive work like an architectural space in a way that it complements the existing architectural context. Framing the lateral arches and pendentives of the chapel, fake painted columns create a perimetrical arrangement of frames that depict prophets and sibyls. They are topped by paired atlases, which seem to support the central frames, whose corners are occupied by nude males, literally named Inudi. Depicting scenes of the world's creation and the flood, these frames alternate between large ones where the scene occupies the entire outline and those that are restricted on two sides by painted medallions. The Sistine Chapel ceiling shows a masterful combination of false architectural elements and animated forms violating their outline and projecting outwards. Finished in 1512, around the same time as Raffaello's School of Athens, this widely vivid work would be one of the earliest predictions of Mannerist art's evolution, and it largely defined Michelangelo's affinity for dynamism. In 1525, before leaving Florence permanently for Rome, Michelangelo designed the Laurentian Library close to Brunelleschi's Church of San Lorenzo. This building is composed of a main reading hall and an entrance vestibule that is probably the most interesting aspect of it. Its walls appear in plan as if undulating, alternating between frames with triangular or rounded pediments and pairs of columns recessed into the wall above pairs of scrolls. Of course, the centerpiece of this setting is the staircase towards the main hall, designed in 1550 by Bartolomeo Ammannati based on a model by Michelangelo. This staircase branches into three parts and spreads outwards in a trapezoidal shape as if, in the words of David Watkin, it spills into the room like a flow of cooling lava. The central portion of the staircase is composed of curved steps, which are ovoid at the bottom and then become curved, curling laterally into volutes. In 1546, Michelangelo designed the Piazza del Campidoglio on the Capitoline Hill, a plan which included a new symmetrical arrangement and renovation of the Palazzo Senatorio and the other two palaces facing the square. Having been an administrative center of Rome since the ancient times, the Capitoline Hill literally turns its back towards the Forum Romanum with this new arrangement, facing the St. Peter's Basilica, the new cultural center of Rome. Using the trapezoidal shape previously employed in the papal city of Pienza, Michelangelo paired it with the oval of the piazza's new paving, a geometry that would become widespread later during the Baroque era. The Palazzo Farnese, ordered by Pope Paul III, was designed by Antonio da Sangalo the Younger with important contributions by Michelangelo, Jacopo Barocci da Vignola and Giacomo della Porta. A comparison of this palace with a similarly massive and also freestanding Palazzo Strozzi in Florence would be useful to reassess the evolution from Florentine to Roman Renaissance, from rusticated stonework with pronounced arches to classical window frames placed against a flat backdrop which is clearly framed on the corners by rusticated columns of stone. Here, however, we see a hierarchy starting from rather plain kneeling windows at the bottom, characterized by their pronounced scrolls, to windows topped by triangular and rounded pediments on the first floor, and windows topped by broken pediments on the second floor. This palace also reverses the typical hierarchy of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian adopted since the Colosseum, because here the first floor windows are framed by Corinthian columns and the second floor windows by Ionic columns. The main disruptive element of the whole ensemble is Michelangelo's choice to mark the central doorway with a large arch, above which on the first floor stands a balcony. This balcony would become a recurring theme of political symbolism in architecture as a kind of tribune overlooking the square where a leader would appear to address the crowd and become the center of attention. Let's not forget, of course, how Mussolini would utilize this attribute many centuries later when he was giving speeches from the balcony of Palazzo Venezia in Rome. The Palazzo Farnese also sports an interesting rear facade facing a garden, where the rows of windows are interrupted suddenly by three massive bays marked by loggias on the ground and second floor, and windows on the first floor. Here we see again the motif of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian in the form of large columns framing the full height of the base. So, I think that as a conclusion to this video, it is important to realize the evolution of Renaissance art away from the humanist ideals of harmony and wholeness that Alberti advocated for. Architecture increasingly becomes a medium of emotional expression and material excess, whether through the snapped pediments and ovoid steps of Michelangelo, or his nude males posing erotically in the Cappella Sistina. These are largely expressions of personal passions and quirks of the artist, and at the same time the increased interest in grandeur and masterful composition is meant to aggressively project a certain political elite of the era. This is something that is evoked most prominently in the last example of the central balcony of the Palazzo Farnese, and we will see it better in one of my next videos about the St. Peter's Basilica. And I think that the tightening bond between Mannerist architecture and the political and religious context it is meant to project should also respond to the attempts of some postmodern advocates of classicism to completely rationalize it and associate it with objective metaphysical ideals of beauty, aesthetics, and comfort, values that would have been more relevant with Alberti's work than its mutations. This, however, is an issue I will address further in a later video.